The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Dr. Rachel Torres barely noticed. Her eyes burned from staring at the computer screens that covered every wall of the Luna Station Communication Center. Numbers and wave patterns danced across the displays, painting pictures of distant stars and empty space. For 30 years, the massive radio telescopes on the moon had been listening to the universe, hoping to find proof that Earth was not alone. Most nights were the same. Static from old stars, radio bursts from spinning galaxies, and the endless whisper of cosmic background radiation. Rachel had learned to read these signals like a musician reads sheet music. Each pattern told a story of supernovas, black holes, and the birth of new worlds. But tonight felt different. A small beep from her workstation made her look up. Deep in the noise from a star system 47 light-years away, something was moving. Not the random chaos of natural radio waves, but something with rhythm, something with purpose. Rachel leaned forward and adjusted the filters. The signal became clearer, though still buried in static. It was not like the simple mathematical patterns that scientists had always expected from alien civilizations. This was complex, layered, and seemed almost desperate. She called over her assistant, Dr. Mark Chen, who had been dozing at his desk. "Take a look at this," she said, pointing at the screen. "Tell me what you think." Mark rubbed his eyes and studied the display. "It looks like encrypted communication, but the pattern is strange. It is not broadcasting to everyone, it is more like..." He paused, thinking. Like someone talking to someone else they know. Private conversation. Rachel felt her heart speed up. If this was real alien communication, it would change everything. But something about the signals worried her. They did not sound happy or welcoming. They sounded afraid. Over the next few hours, Rachel and Mark ran the signals through every computer program they had. The encryption was unlike anything on Earth, but slowly, patterns began to emerge. The aliens seemed to use mathematical concepts that humans understood, but arranged them in completely new ways. By morning, they had managed to decode small pieces. The first word they translated made Rachel's blood run cold. It was a name, repeated over and over in different voices. Then came another word that needed no translation in any language: help. As the sun rose over the lunar landscape, more members of the research team arrived for their shifts. Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's best linguist, took one look at the translations and immediately started working on bigger sections of the messages. What she found made everyone in the room go quiet. The aliens called themselves the Keth. They were trapped on their homeworld by machines that hunted them day and night. Their cities were gone. Their governments had fallen. Most of their people were already dead. The few survivors hid in underground bunkers, slowly starving as their supplies ran out. But the most heartbreaking discovery was that these were not distress calls sent into space hoping for rescue. These were personal messages between family members, friends saying goodbye, parents telling children how much they loved them. The Keth had no idea that anyone was listening. They thought they were completely alone in the universe. Rachel read, message after message, each one translated by the computer. A mother sang a lullaby to her child, knowing it might be the last time. A teacher recorded the history of their people, hoping someone might find it after they were gone. An old Keth wrote to his brother on the other side of the planet, not knowing if he was still alive. "They have been sending these messages for months," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe longer. They think no one can hear them." The weight of what they had discovered settled over the team. Somewhere in the darkness of space, an entire species was dying, and their final words were drifting through the void like whispers. The Keth had never tried to contact other worlds because they did not know other worlds had life on them. They were facing extinction alone. Rachel stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the lunar surface. Earth hung in the black sky like a blue jewel, beautiful and peaceful. Down there, billions of humans lived their daily lives, unaware that they had just become the only hope for a dying alien race. The more messages they decoded, the worse the situation became. The mechanical hunters that stalked the Keth were getting smarter, learning to track even the smallest energy signatures. Entire communities went silent one by one as their power ran out or the machines found them. Mark pulled up a star chart and pointed to a dim point of light. That is where the signals are coming from, the Epsilon 7 system, 47 light-years away. How long would it take to get there? Rachel asked, though she already feared the answer. With our current technology? About 200 years. By the time we arrived, there would be nothing left to save. But even as he spoke, both scientists knew they could not just listen to an entire species die. Humanity had recently developed experimental faster-than-light drives, though they had never been tested over such distances. It would be incredibly dangerous, maybe impossible. But if they did nothing, the Keth would face their end alone in the dark. Rachel looked back at her screens where new messages continued to arrive. In one, a young Keth promised his sick grandfather that he would keep fighting until the very end. In another, a group of survivors shared their last meal together, grateful for friendship even in their darkest hour. "We have to tell Earth Command about this," Rachel said finally. "Maybe they will think we are crazy. Maybe they will say it is too dangerous to try. But we cannot just watch this happen and do nothing." As she prepared the report that would change human history, Rachel realized that the universe had just become a much smaller and more fragile place. The Keth's private whispers had traveled across the emptiness between stars to reach the one species that might be crazy enough to try saving them. The question now was whether humanity would prove worthy of that trust. The emergency meeting had been called at 3 a.m, but the war room at Earth Command was packed with officials from every major nation. Admiral David Kane stood at the head of the long table, his weathered face grim as he reviewed the Luna Station report for the 3rd time. Around him sat generals, scientists, and politicians who would decide the fate of 2 species. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said General Lisa Park, Earth's top military strategist. "We have discovered an alien species that is about to go extinct, and our scientists want us to send a rescue fleet to a star system that is farther than we have ever traveled before." Dr. Rachel Torres, who had been brought down from Luna Station just hours earlier, nodded. "The Keth have maybe weeks left, possibly less. Every day we delay, more of them die. Their messages show that the mechanical hunters are closing in on the last survivor groups." President Maria Santos of the American Federation leaned forward. "Dr. Torres, I understand your concern for these beings, but we are talking about risking thousands of human lives. Our fastest ships have never gone beyond 15 light-years. This mission would take us 47 light-years from home." "With respect, Madam President," Rachel replied, "we are the only ones who know they exist. If we do nothing, an entire civilization dies, and the universe becomes a little more empty." The room erupted in arguments. Some officials worried about the cost of such a mission. Others questioned whether humanity had the right to interfere in alien affairs. A few suggested that the signals might be a trap designed to lure human ships away from Earth. Admiral Kane raised his hand for silence. "I have spoken with our best engineers. Commander Alex Rivers has reviewed our capabilities, and he believes a rescue mission is possible, though extremely dangerous. Our newest ships, equipped with the experimental quantum drives, could make the journey in about 6 months." Commander Rivers stood up from his seat near the back of the room. He was younger than most of the officials present, but his reputation as Earth's most skilled deep space pilot was legendary. "The technology exists, but we would be pushing it beyond all safety limits. We would need at least 12 ships to carry enough equipment and supplies for a large-scale evacuation. The risks are enormous." "What kind of risks?" asked Dr. James White, Earth's chief science advisor. Rivers pulled up a holographic display, showing the proposed flight path. "Hyperspace jumps over such distances could tear our ships apart. We would be traveling through regions of space we have never explored, with no way to call for help if something goes wrong. And when we arrive, we have no idea what we will find waiting for us." The debate continued for hours. Some argued that humanity should focus on its own problems rather than risk everything for strangers. Others worried about setting a precedent that would force Earth to respond to every crisis in the galaxy. But Dr. Torres had prepared for these objections. She activated the room's audio system and played a translated message from the Keth. The alien voice was soft and musical, filled with sadness but also with love. Even through the computer translation, everyone in the room could hear the raw emotion. "This is a Keth parent singing to her child," Rachel explained as the haunting melody filled the room. "She knows that the mechanical hunters will find their shelter soon. She wants her daughter to remember that she was loved, even at the end. This message was never meant for us to hear. It was just a mother's final gift to her child." The room fell completely silent. Even the hardest military officials looked moved by the alien lullaby. When the recording ended, Commander Rivers stepped forward again. "I have 3,000 volunteers ready to go," he said quietly. "Pilots, engineers, medical staff, and Marines who heard about this mission and asked to be included. They know the risks and they want to try anyway." General Park shook her head. 3,000 of our best people, heading into unknown space to save aliens we have never met. If this mission fails, Earth loses some of its most valuable citizens. "And if we succeed," replied Dr. Torres, "humanity becomes something greater than we ever imagined." President Santos called for a brief recess and the officials broke into smaller groups to discuss the proposal. Rachel watched them argue and realized that this moment would define what kind of species humanity truly was. Were they explorers and protectors, or would they choose safety over compassion? When the meeting reconvened, Admiral Kane called for a vote. One by one, the representatives of Earth's nations made their choice. Some voted yes immediately, inspired by the idea of humanity as galactic rescuers. Others hesitated but eventually agreed that the potential rewards outweighed the risks. The final vote was unanimous. Operation Distant Hope was approved with a budget that would strain Earth's resources but provide the rescue fleet with everything they needed. Commander Rivers would lead the mission aboard the Starship Endeavour, humanity's fastest and most advanced vessel. As the meeting ended, Rachel felt a mixture of relief and terror. They had chosen to try the impossible, to risk everything for beings they had never met. In 6 months, the human fleet would arrive at Epsilon 7, either as heroes or as another tragedy lost in the depths of space. Commander Rivers approached her as the officials filed out of the room. "Dr. Torres, I want you and your translation team on my ship. If we are going to save the Keth, we will need to be able to talk to them." Rachel nodded, already thinking about the challenges ahead. They would have to find the survivors, fight off the mechanical hunters, and evacuate thousands of aliens using technology that had never been tested under combat conditions. But as she looked around the empty war room, she felt proud of what humanity had chosen to do. The Keth had whispered into the void, never expecting an answer. Soon they would learn that they were not alone after all. The hyperspace tunnel looked like a river of twisted light, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Commander Alex Rivers stood in the Endeavour's observation deck, watching reality bend around their small fleet as they jumped deeper into unexplored space. Each jump brought them closer to Epsilon 7, but it also pushed their ships further from any hope of rescue if something went wrong. "Jump completion in 30 seconds, announced Lieutenant Tom Bradley from the bridge. The ship shuddered as the quantum drives fought against the fabric of space itself, forcing a passage through dimensions that humans barely understood. Dr. Rachel Torres floated nearby in the zero-gravity observation area, her tablet displaying the latest intercepted messages from the Keth homeworld. The news was getting worse each day. During their 6-month journey, she had watched entire communities go silent as the mechanical hunters found them one by one. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed, and normal space returned with a flash that made everyone shield their eyes. Through the observation windows they could see the other 11 ships of the human fleet, their hulls scarred from the stress of multiple long-distance jumps. "Another successful jump," Rivers said, but his voice was tired. The experimental drives were holding up better than expected, but each jump was a gamble. The engineering teams worked around the clock to repair stress fractures and recalibrate systems that were never designed for such extreme use. Rachel checked her latest translation. From the Keth signals, the message was from someone called Elder Nim, one of the few Keith leaders still alive. His community of 200 survivors was trapped in an underground complex, their power failing, their food nearly gone. The mechanical hunters had found their main entrance and were slowly cutting through the sealed blast doors. "How much longer until they break through?" Rivers asked, reading over her shoulder. "According to this, maybe 3 days," Rachel replied. "But that was transmitted 6 hours ago. We might already be too late for them." The fleet had been receiving these desperate updates throughout their journey. Each message was like watching a countdown to extinction. The Keth were not warriors. They had been a peaceful civilization focused on art, science, and philosophy. When the ancient war machines had awakened on their world, they had no military to fight back with. Rivers activated his communication system and connected to all 12 ships. "This is Commander Rivers. We are now 2 jumps away from Epsilon 7. All ship commanders report readiness status." The responses came in quickly. Captain Emma Walsh of the rescue ship Guardian reported that her medical and evacuation teams were ready. Captain Jose Martinez of the heavy cruiser Defiant confirmed that his Marines were prepared for immediate ground combat. One by one, each ship captain acknowledged that they were as ready as they could be for whatever waited at their destination. But readiness felt like a small comfort when they were traveling into the unknown. The Keith messages had described the mechanical hunters as relentless killing machines, but provided few details about their capabilities or numbers. Humanity was flying blind into what might be the most dangerous situation they had ever faced. Dr. Sarah Kim, Rachel's assistant, floated over with a new batch of translated messages. "These just came in from the northern continent," she said. "There's a large survivor group holed up in what used to be their capital city. About 800 Keth, including many children." Rachel read the messages and felt her heart sink. The survivors were trapped in the ruins of a great library, surrounded by the mechanical hunters. They had managed to activate some ancient defense systems, but their shields were failing. The group's leader, a teacher named Kayla, was recording the final lessons of Keth civilization, hoping someone might find them someday. 800, Rivers repeated. That might be the largest group of survivors left on the entire planet. The weight of responsibility was crushing. Every human on the fleet knew that they were probably the last hope for the Keth species. If the rescue mission failed, there would be no second chance. The mechanical hunters would complete their program of extermination, and an entire civilization would vanish from the universe. Another message came through from Elder Nim's community. The blast doors had been breached. The mechanical hunters were inside the complex, moving through the tunnels toward the survivors' final hiding place. Nim's voice was calm as he described the situation, but Rachel could hear the fear underneath his words. "They are coming for us now," the translation read. "We can hear their metal feet in the corridors. To whoever finds this message, know that we tried to preserve what we could of our people's wisdom. We go into the darkness hoping that, somewhere, someone will remember that we existed." Rachel closed her eyes and tried to push down the feeling of helplessness. They were still days away from Epsilon 7, racing through hyperspace as fast as their ships could manage. But it felt like they were crawling toward a disaster they could not prevent. Rivers seemed to sense her frustration. "Dr. Torres, I know. This is hard to watch, but remember that every message we receive means those people are still alive. As long as we keep hearing from them, there is still hope." The final hyperspace jump to Epsilon 7 was the most dangerous yet. The quantum drives had to punch through the gravitational interference of the star system, a feat that no human ship had ever attempted. The Endeavor's hull groaned under the stress, and several warning alarms sounded as they emerged into normal space. But they had made it. Through the bridge windows, Rivers could see a planet covered in brown and gray clouds, its surface scarred by what looked like massive fires. This was the Keth homeworld, and it looked like a vision of hell. "All ships, battle stations," Rivers ordered. "Long-range scanners are detecting movement on the surface, lots of movement." The mechanical hunters were everywhere, swarming across the planet's surface like a plague of metal insects. They had turned the once beautiful Keth homeworld into a wasteland. but the scanner reports showed faint life signs still scattered across several continents. The Keth were still alive. Some of them, at least. And now, after a journey that had pushed human technology to its limits, the real mission could begin. Rachel watched the planet grow larger on the screens and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. They had crossed the void to answer whispers that were never meant to be heard. Now it was time to prove that humanity deserved to call itself a rescuing species. The first mechanical hunter they encountered was the size of a building, moving across the devastated landscape with deadly grace. Its sleek metal body gleamed in the dim light of Epsilon 7's sun, and sensor arrays swept back and forth like the eyes of a predator searching for prey. When it detected the approaching human dropships, it turned toward them with fluid precision and opened fire. Captain Emma Walsh gripped the controls of her rescue shuttle as plasma bolts streaked past the cockpit windows. Around her, 11 other human ships descended toward the planet's surface, their weapons blazing as they engaged the mechanical hunters that rose to meet them. "This is Guardian Leader to all rescue teams," Walsh broadcast over the communication system. "The enemy is more advanced than we expected, but they seem confused by our attack patterns. They have been hunting scattered survivors for so long that they do not know how to fight organized resistance." On the surface below, the mechanical hunters moved in perfect coordination, but their tactics were designed for hunting frightened refugees, not trained military units. The human pilots had been drilled in pack-fighting techniques, and they swarmed around the larger machines like angry wasps, striking from multiple angles before darting away. Dr. Rachel Torres sat in the passenger compartment of Walsh's shuttle, monitoring the Keth distress signals that were growing stronger as they descended. Her translation equipment showed dozens of survivor groups across the planet, all reporting the same thing. The mechanical hunters were converging on human landing sites, abandoning their normal patrol routes to deal with this new threat. "The survivors are reporting that the machines are leaving their areas," Rachel announced over the intercom. "Our attack is drawing them away from the Keth hiding places." Walsh nodded as she piloted the shuttle through a maze of twisted metal that had once been a Keth city. "Good. That gives us time to reach the survivor shelters before the machines regroup." The first rescue site was Elder Nim's underground complex, where 200 Keth survivors had been trapped for months. The shuttle touched down near the entrance to the facility, and Walsh's rescue team immediately began working to clear the debris that blocked the doorway. Inside the complex, the Keth had heard the sounds of battle above and assumed that the mechanical hunters were preparing for a final assault. Elder Nim gathered his people in the deepest chamber, where they held hands and prepared to face their end together. The blast door that protected their final hiding place had been damaged in the earlier hunter attack, and it took the human rescue team several minutes to cut through the warped metal. When the door finally opened, both species got their first look at each other. Elder Nim was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that glowed softly in the darkness. Patterns of light moved across his body like living tattoos, shifting colors in response to his emotions. Behind him, the other Keth survivors clustered together, their bioluminescent skin flickering with patterns that Rachel's equipment identified as fear and confusion. Captain Walsh removed her helmet and stepped forward, her hands raised to show she was not armed. "Elder Nim," she said, hoping that the translation device on her belt would work correctly. "We are humans. We heard your messages. We came to help." The old Keth stared at her for a long moment, his light patterns shifting from fear to something that might have been wonder. When he spoke, his voice was like music, rising and falling in tones that seemed to carry emotion as much as meaning. "You came from the void." The translation device rendered his words. "We sent our whispers into the darkness, never believing anyone would hear." Around the chamber, the other Keth began to understand what was happening. Their light patterns changed to brilliant golds and blues that Rachel's equipment translated as joy and hope. Several of the younger Keth began to weep, their tears glowing softly as they fell. But there was no time for extended first contact ceremonies. The sounds of battle were growing closer as the mechanical hunters realized that the real threat was not the human ships overhead, but the rescue teams on the ground. "Elder, Nim, we need to get your people out of here immediately," Walsh said. "Our ships are waiting to take you to safety." The evacuation of the underground complex took less than an hour, but it felt like the longest hour of Captain Walsh's life. The Keth moved slowly, weakened by months of hiding and poor nutrition. Many of the older survivors had to be carried, and several of the children were too frightened to leave the only home they had known. As the rescue team helped the last group of Keth toward the surface, the mechanical hunters found them. 3 of the sleek killing machines rounded the corner of a ruined building, their weapon systems charging for an attack that would kill everyone in the open area. Lieutenant Mike Johnson, Walsh's second-in-command, threw himself between the hunters and the Keth survivors, his heavy plasma rifle sending bolts of energy toward the machines. "Get them to the shuttle," he shouted. "I will hold these things off." The next few minutes were chaos. Human Marines engaged the mechanical hunters in close combat, while the rescue team rushed the Keth survivors toward the waiting shuttles. The machines were incredibly fast and deadly accurate, but they seemed confused by the humans' willingness to sacrifice themselves to protect the aliens. One of the hunters broke through the Marine line and headed straight for a group of Keth children. Elder Nim stepped in front of the machine, his light patterns flashing in what Rachel later learned was a Keth battle challenge. The hunter's weapons locked onto the old alien, preparing to fire. Captain Walsh appeared from behind a pile of rubble and tackled the mechanical hunter, knocking it off balance just as its plasma cannon discharged. The bolt meant for Elder Nim instead struck the ground, melting rock and metal but leaving both the Keth and the human unharmed. Walsh rolled away from the machine and fired her sidearm at its sensor cluster, temporarily blinding it. Lieutenant Johnson and 2 other Marines immediately concentrated their fire on the hunter's damaged systems, finally bringing it down in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The other 2 hunters retreated when they detected more human forces approaching, but the message was clear. The machines were adapting to human tactics, and future rescues would be even more dangerous. As the shuttles lifted off with their precious cargo of Keth survivors, Elder Nim made his way to the cockpit where Captain Walsh was piloting the craft. His light patterns had settled into steady blues and golds that the translation equipment identified as gratitude and respect. "Human Captain Walsh," he said in his musical voice, "my people have a saying. The void is dark, but it sometimes carries light. Today you brought light to our darkness." Walsh smiled, though she knew the old Keth probably could not interpret human facial expressions. "Elder Nim, we have only just begun. There are thousands more of your people scattered across this world, and we are going to find them all." As their shuttle climbed toward the safety of the human fleet, both species began to understand that they had just witnessed something remarkable. First contact between humans and aliens had not happened in a sterile laboratory or formal diplomatic meeting. It had happened in the middle of a battle, with both races risking everything to protect each other from a common enemy. The great hall of the Starship Endeavour had been transformed into a meeting place unlike anything in human history. Floating in the zero-gravity chamber, representatives of 2 species worked together to plan the final phase of the largest rescue operation ever attempted. Elder Nim drifted near the central display table, his bioluminescent skin casting gentle blue light across the faces of the human officers around him. 18 hours had passed since the evacuation began, and the rescue tally stood at over 4,000 Keth survivors pulled from hiding places across their dying world. Each rescue had been a battle against time and the mechanical hunters, but the human fleet had proven more adaptable than the ancient machines. Commander Alex Rivers studied the tactical display showing the final survivor sites. "We have confirmed life signs at 12 more locations," he announced to the mixed group of humans and Keth. "But the mechanical hunters have changed their behavior. They are no longer spreading out across the planet. They are concentrating their forces around the remaining survivor shelters." Kala, the Keth teacher who had been rescued from the Great Library, pulsed with orange light patterns that Dr. Rachel Torres had learned meant concern. "The machines are learning from your attacks," she said through the translation system. "They were created by our ancestors long ago to fight a war that ended before my people were born. But they have been evolving. becoming smarter with each battle they fight. The revelation that the mechanical hunters were actually ancient Keth War machines gone wrong had shocked everyone. Thousands of years earlier, the Keth had fought a war against an aggressive alien species. When they won, they programmed their war machines to eliminate any remaining enemy forces. But something had gone wrong with the programming, and the machines had eventually classified all biological life as enemies. The irony is terrible, Elder Nim had explained when they first learned the truth. My people were destroyed by their own creations, machines built to protect them. But the dark history of the hunters had also provided the rescue operation with an unexpected advantage. Working together, human engineers and Keth scholars had discovered weaknesses in the ancient programming that could be exploited. Dr. Torres floated over to join the tactical discussion, her tablet displaying the latest intelligence on hunter behavior. The machines have a central command unit that coordinates all their activities. It is located in the ruins of your old capital city. If we can disable it, the individual hunters will become confused and easier to defeat. Captain Emma Walsh, who had led more rescue missions than anyone else in the fleet, nodded thoughtfully. But getting to the command unit means fighting through the largest concentration of hunters on the planet. It would be incredibly dangerous. Not just dangerous, added Captain Jose Martinez from his position near the tactical display. It would be suicide for any normal attack force. The command center is protected by hundreds of the machines. Elder Nim's light patterns shifted to the deep purple that indicated he was thinking hard about a difficult problem. When he spoke, his musical voice carried a note of determination that needed no translation. There is another way, he said. The command unit still recognizes certain Keth authority codes from the original war. If my people approach it while broadcasting the proper signals, the machines might hesitate long enough for your forces to strike. The human officers exchanged glances. The plan would require Keth survivors to put themselves in incredible danger, acting as bait to distract the hunters while human strike teams attacked the command center. Elder Nim, Commander Rivers, said carefully, "We came here to save your people, not to ask them to sacrifice themselves in battle." The old Keth's light patterns flashed with colors that Torres had never seen before. When the translation came through, she understood why. It was the Keth expression for fierce pride. "Commander Rivers, for months my people have hidden in holes, waiting for death to find us. You have given us the chance to die fighting for something important instead of cowering in the darkness. Many of us would consider that a gift." The assault on the Hunter Command Center began at dawn on the second day. 300 Keth volunteers, led by Elder Nim and teacher Kayla, approached the ruins of their ancient capital while broadcasting the old authority codes. Behind them, hidden in the rubble of destroyed buildings, human strike teams waited for their moment. The mechanical hunters responded exactly as predicted. Instead of immediately attacking the approaching Keth, they surrounded them and began transmitting queries, trying to verify the authority codes against their damaged databases. For precious minutes, the machines hesitated, confused by orders that came from their creators' descendants. That hesitation was all the human forces needed. Marine assault teams struck the command center from 6 different directions, while fighter pilots attacked the Hunter perimeter. The battle was fierce but brief. Without clear orders from their central coordinator, the mechanical hunters fought as individuals instead of as a unified force. When the command unit finally fell, its destruction sent a shutdown signal to every hunter on the planet. Across the Keith homeworld, the ancient war machines simply stopped moving. Their long campaign of extermination finally ended. In the aftermath of victory, the evacuation of the remaining Keith survivors took only hours. The last shuttle to leave the surface carried Elder Nim and a small container of soil from his homeworld, a reminder of what his people had lost and what they had survived. As the human fleet prepared for the journey back to Earth, both species began to understand how much they had gained from their unlikely meeting. The Keth brought knowledge of energy manipulation and genetic engineering that would advance human science by centuries. More importantly, they brought the confirmation that Earth was not alone in harboring intelligent life. For their part, the humans had demonstrated something that amazed the Keth: the willingness of one species to risk everything to save another. It was a concept that teacher Kayla spent hours discussing with Dr. Torres, trying to understand why beings who had never met the Keth would travel across the galaxy to rescue them. In our long history, Kayla explained as they watched Earth grow, larger through the observation windows, no species has ever done what yours did for us. You heard our whispers in the void and answered with action. This makes you either very wise or very foolish. Dr. Torres smiled as she considered the question. Maybe both. But I think that is what makes us human. The return journey to Earth took 6 months, during which time the two species learned to work together in ways that benefited both. Keth energy technology allowed the human ships to travel faster and more efficiently. Human medical knowledge helped heal Keth survivors who had been injured during their long ordeal. By the time the fleet reached Earth, they had become more than just rescuers and refugees. They had become partners in a relationship that would reshape both civilizations. The Keth were given sanctuary on a world in the outer Sol system, where they began the long process of rebuilding their society. But they also established research facilities on Earth and Luna, sharing their knowledge freely with their saviors. More importantly, the joint human-Keth monitoring stations that were built in the years following the rescue began detecting other civilizations in distress. The galaxy, it seemed, was full of species crying out in the darkness, hoping someone might hear their whispers. And now, they had the Rescue Alliance to answer those calls. What had begun as one impossible mission to save a dying race had become a commitment to ensure that no intelligent species would face extinction alone. The universe was still a dangerous place, but it was no longer as dark or as silent as it once seemed.